All right, I'm back. I'm back. Wait, uh-oh. I just got to test my mic. Oh, my mic sounds nice. Test one. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. They just cut me off at the knees. That was Who Can Get Busy like This Man. Uh, Again, all our tracks today will be off of the 30th anniversary um, One for All Brand Nubian album. But anyway, today we're talking about demagogues, cult leaders, and dictators because I think that the concept of black leadership has been warped, going all the way back to the old plantation leader. In the United States, the first quote unquote black leaders were handpicked individuals that the plantation masters would put the plantation, the head man, slave driver, and the plantation preacher. And these people were given finer clothes, better rations than the rest of us, and would even be a position that we strive to be obtained. And I think many aspects of black leadership are still embedded in that. I don't think we've ever, as a people in the diaspora, as victims of genocide, enslavement, and oppression, and victims of the Ma'afa, as members of the African diaspora, I don't think that we've ever formalized our leadership principles, our leadership protocols, and our leadership standards, and the systems or steps we take to elevate someone to leadership. And because that has not been formalized and refined and properly developed, we are plagued by demagogues, cult leaders, and dictators. And when people approach me, I literally have people come to me and say, Bro Diallo, why aren't you a black leader? Why aren't you more popular? And I say, I wish I knew. But then my real problem comes is they literally start advising me on how to engage in mass manipulation. They'll say something like, I hear this regularly, dozens of times, a month or a year, where people come to me and say, well, I agree with what you say, but your approach is all wrong. And they say, you know, black folks aren't going to give up religion and spirituality, so you shouldn't attack it. I go to my Patreon, and when people stop supporting me or exit Patreon, I could screenshot and post this, but I'd have to keep them anonymous. But people, a lot of times I lose support because people say he talks bad about Allah, which I believe I probably said something bad about Jesus or Allah during this show, that I anti-religion. I am personally an atheist. I am personally an anti-theist. But when I organize or work in an organizational structure, I would never develop or organize a black atheist movement or a black atheist groups because I don't think atheism is that central to us organizing ourselves and empowering ourselves. But one thing I will not do is I will join a secular organization, which secular bodies or secular organizations are open to people of wide range. You could be a Hare Krishna, Christian, Muslim, make up your own religion and call yourself a spiritual guru, but you're not allowed to use your religious, I would say delusion, but let's be, more tactful. You cannot use your religious beliefs or feelings or dogmas to dictate policy within the organization or the movement. So I support secularism in the movements, but I allow for and accept religiosity amongst my people and my community. But people, I am told that I would have a broader reach if I simply came out and said, allow people, if I was not so critical of religion and spirituality. But I have to be critical of religion and spirituality in the capacity of the Bro Diallo shows, my writing and teachings, because these are conclusions that I've reached. And if you want to challenge it, you can't come to me and say, I challenge this because it's unpopular. I don't care. You can challenge it by saying your conclusions or your analysis is inconsistent, inaccurate, or incomplete, and then demonstrate to me those holes in my argument or expand on my argument. Good morning. So, but That's just one thing. Or even veganism. Well, you got to respect veganism, or you got to stop pushing this or stop pushing that. But more or less, to conclude, people have encouraged me to engage in mass manipulation in order to have a broader reach or have more authority. But to me, that would be illegitimate authority. Authority that I'm not really worthy of, because if the masses of black people say we don't want no vegan, atheist, humanist leader, then I shouldn't pretend to be other than a vegan, atheist, humanist in order to obtain that leadership position. But because we have not clearly defined the steps to leaderships, what makes you worthy, even our oppressors, as savage, brutal, inhumane as they are, they set very detailed parameters for leadership. Whether you want to be a professor, which is a leadership position, whether you want to be a manager of a water reclamation district, or you want to be the leader of the free world, the president of the United States. They set, geographical. They even have age, how old you must be, minimum age qualifications, maximum age, or fitness, like you have to take a physical and you have to make the results of your physical public. That was a scandal when Trump went to that crazy doctor. They went to that crazy doctor and he lied and said he was like 142 pounds. And white people in politics were like, this is an outrage. We didn't get to know your body mass index, your cholesterol. You have to go through a psych evaluation. But to be a black leader, you just have to be able to convince enough people that you are attractive and entertain. It's a popularity contest. And this leads a lot of black people to just be anti-leadership altogether. We go from inadequate, incompetent, unworthy leadership to, oh, well, I ain't got no leader. I lead myself. When it comes to our movements, and our movements are more important than anything else. Our liberation movements, our empowerment movements, our movements for collective security, our movements for cultural development or cultural reclamation, finding what we've lost. And because we don't have protocols and standards and principles and even techniques for determining who's worthy to be a leader, determining what is the process for getting into a leadership role, and what conditions can we impeach, expel, or convict and do away with a leader. So it's not just the fault of the dictators, cult leaders, and demagogues. It is also the fault of the masses. Leadership is necessary. Leadership is important. And leadership is one of the most manipulated and one of the weakest links in our overall culture. And that's why you get a little money and you get a little fame. You can write up a contract and you'll have people ready to fight and die for you. Because we don't have standards for leadership. We can have one of the most beloved black men in the world, Barack Obama, who spent his entire term as president. And if you know Obama, if you're here in Chicago, before he was President Obama, when he was Senator Obama, or wannabe failed Congressman Obama, or street organizer Obama, or college professor Obama, or college student Obama, you could say he spent his whole life stabbing black people in the back. But there is no yardstick to measure whether or not Obama was a good leader for black people. I know people say, oh, Obama did nothing for black people. But that's not an analysis. That's a complaint. And I don't argue with that complaint. But we need, in order to prevent future Obamas from emerging, we need an analysis of not just what Obama didn't do, but why do black people still love Obama? Why did we love him in the first place? What made him worthy of our respect and admiration and support in the first damn place? And at this point, Obama is not a cult leader, a demagogue, or a dictator. Obama's not even a person at this point. Obama is a brand. But when I even talk about that, I'm talking about amongst the woke folks. We could even say, well, black masses, they just love America. They love democracy. They just want to secure it bag. And we in the conscious community, we who are revolutionary, we who believe in freedom, we love pointing fingers at the black masses who ain't woke, the 85ers, since we celebrating the 30th anniversary of Brand Nubian's debut album. Let's use some of that language. We love us 5%ers, us poor righteous teachers. Love pointing fingers at the 85ers and condemning the 10%. But we have to look at where do we go wrong? Because even if you look at the leader of the black masses, the Obama, the mainstream civil rights organizations and the mainstream civil rights leaders, within the conscious community, we still have a plague of dictators, cult leaders, and cults. Can't have a cult leader without a cult. And demagogues. It is a plague, it is a pox, it is something if we don't get out in front of. And if we don't have a system for picking our leaders, guess what? Our oppressors do. And many organizations that come to prominence, many individuals that come to prominence, even the ones that come out and say the white man is the devil, that come out and say that bring the system down, goddamn America, that have all this anti-American rhetoric, all this anti-white rhetoric, all this revolutionary hyperbole, many of them were handpicked and anointed by the system. And that's why you can have someone like a Minister Farrakhan who one day goes and says something anti-Semitic, gutter religion, and the next day he's meeting with prominent leaders of the Zionist movement. So we need, and I have my own ideas about what makes someone a worthy or competent black leader. I have my ideas about what should be the term limits and expectations for leaders. I have my own ideas, but I'm just saying, we as a people, me having these ideas sitting here in my own head is not adequate. We need a movement or a discussion on that. Because if not, I'm going to keep saying this, we're going to continue to have dictators, demagogues, and cult leaders. One emerging demagogue, Grandmaster Jay, who was recently arrested in the INFAC, Not Effing Around Coalition. And I've been very critical of the INFAC because I see this as an emerging, he is a demagogic leader, and this is an emerging secular cult. And that's the thing, if you follow research on cults, if you follow the BITE model, you will learn that, can I help you? Huh? You're getting your laptop? Oh, all right, sorry. You will find that, where was I? Sorry, being distracted. Trying to bring me down. Like Bobby did Whitney, like Whitney did Bobby. Anyway, I digress. Continuing on. In fact, the Supreme Commander of INFAC was arrested for shining a flashlight at federal agents at a demonstration. And that flashlight just happened to be on the barrel of his gun. And so he was arrested, and many people, even legal organizations, have said that his arrest was politically motivated, that he did not aim his weapon at the police, and that He's out of jail now. He has been released. His profile has been elevated. But the same prosecutor, get this, that Daniel Cameron, the same guy that couldn't prosecute the murderers of Breonna Taylor. He just couldn't find a crime when a black woman is murdered in her own bedroom. Breonna Taylor is murdered. That same prosecutor from the Breonna Taylor case is heading up the case against Grandmaster Jay and the Not Effing Around Coalition. Now, when I saw this, that they said that he was arrested for aiming his gun at federal agents, and as you read the story, really it was a flashlight. In fact, the agents who said that their lives were threatened said that they had a blinding light shined upon them. So literally, they admitted they didn't really see that. At best, they could say he shined a very bright flashlight at them. So if you're kind of in the dark and somebody shines a light at you, all you see is the light. They literally used the word, a blinding flash or a blinding light came over them. So they pretty much open and shut case. They said, we didn't see what he did. We know he shined a light at us, but they said that the light was on the hilt of his gun or something. So in order for him to shine the light, he had to shine the gun, but you don't know that. There's other sources of bright light. It's a mess. But the first thing I thought about was the Bundy Ranch. I don't know if y'all remember during the Obama administration in 2014, this white criminal and his sons, Amon Bundy, were grazing their cattle. This millionaire rancher was grazing his cattle on federal land. And the federal government allows for private ranchers to use welfare and graze their cattle on federally owned land owned by me as a citizen and you as a citizen, all citizens of America hold this land in common. And he had owed, for utilizing public lands for his private profit, he had owed the federal government millions of dollars. And the BLM, not Black Lives Matter, but the Bureau of Land Management said, you either pay us or get your cattle off the land. He says, I'm not paying you and I'm not taking my cattle off of federal land. I'm going to trespass and use this federal land as I see fit because I'm an American or whatever. He's a libertarian. And so as a penalty, he could be arrested, he could be fined, and they could confiscate his cattle. They decided not to arrest him. They did issue him a fine that he said he wasn't going to pay, and the Bureau of Land Management was going to come with these trucks and confiscate his cattle if they found him on federal land. And so this Bundy went on the internet and said, I'm calling all patriots to come here. I want all patriots to come to my ranch to fight the federal government. And don't come if you ain't got a gun. He said, this is where the revolution will start. And Cliven Bundy had all these white folks in military fatigues with military-grade weapons come to Nevada, and they were pointing sniper rifles at Bureau of Land Management officials. And of course, the Bureau of Land Management had to call in the FBI and other armed factions of the government, the BATF and other armed factions to come and protect him as they confiscated the cattle. And there's images all over the internet. Just Google Bundy standoff of white boys on public land aiming weapons at federal agents. It was like a picnic. And I wish I could just say just white folks, because Bundy is an Uncle Tom. Bundy is a racist, but there were more than a few black libertarian Uncle Toms who came there to fight against federal officers. And they were aiming sniper rifles. And this was in defense of an illegal act. This was in defense of a man who was breaking federal law and who owed millions of dollars to the federal government. This isn't even what the Not Effing Around coalition is coming to protect people protesting for justice, not people who had just stole millions of dollars from the federal government. And Cliven Bundy declared war. Ultimately, 19 people were arrested. And when they went to trial, they all got time served. Trump later pardoned many of the Bundys and his supporters. Because when Trump, during his administration. But I didn't see, I'm not a fan of Grandmaster Jay or the In Fact, but right is right, wrong is wrong. So now all of a sudden, white folks, all of a sudden the federal government is want to talk about giving this dude 20 plus years for doing something that we saw them showing on national news every day, and nobody did 2 years. They didn't get 3 years in jail. And he says, I'm carrying this weapon for self-defense. Whereas at in Nevada, at the Cliven Bundy Ranch standoff, they said, come here to fight federal agents. That's not what In Fact announces they're going to do. And you know what happens? They had that other standoff. Cliven, not the father, but his son, went to Nevada and wanted to take federal land from the government. They support states' rights. And let me give you a cliff note. Whenever you hear white people talk about states' rights, they are supporting something that is racist. White people only call for states' rights in support of racism. Notice when California wanted to raise emission standards and to be stricter, carbon emission standards, to have much stricter carbon emission standards than the federal government, and set the standards and reduce carbon emission for the whole nation by leading the charge in California. And the federal government sued California, the governor and the state of California, and said that the state of California had to have its emission standards be consistent, either at the level of meet the minimum standard of the federal government and not go beyond that. And not one redneck white libertarian came out and said states' rights in favor of sustainability or green policy. They only want states' rights when they're trying to get welfare, take federal lands, or they're trying to deny rights to oppressed minority groups. That's the only time they call states' rights. That is a code word for racism. But I even see black people online thinking they can buddy up, and because they go shooting pheasants with white boys, that they support libertarianism and states' rights. But there was another, the Bundys went to another, where was that? They had a second standoff. Anyway, it was in my notes. But there was a second standoff. Let me just pull it up. Man, you just put in Bundy and all this stuff pops up. At the wildlife refuge. Yes, they went to a national wildlife refuge. And in a wildlife refuge, you're not allowed to hunt or to farm or to extract resources or natural resources from wildlife refuge. So they went up to Oregon and they took over this federal building and said, we're going to take this land in the name of the people of Oregon, in the name of states' rights. So these rednecks come from Nevada. After pointing sniper rifles at federal agents in Nevada, they went just 2 years later. They went to Oregon and took over federal property and say they claiming this land. And then they went on social media again and says, everybody come here with your guns. And they tried to have they were trying to spark Civil War II electric boogaloo, have a right-wing capitalist libertarian revolution. And again, they were pointing guns at federal agents. And the federal agents were finally like, enough of this. And they finally shot this guy named Lavoy Fincom, another racist white man, who literally got out of a car and reached in his jacket to pull a gun and was calling for the federal agents to shoot him because he wanted to become a martyr in the white Civil War, the right-wing white revolution. So all I'm saying, all that to say, is there is a strong history. And again, Amon Bundy. They were not convicted by a jury. The jury refused to convict him of a crime, and those who did face convictions, Trump promised them and eventually gave them pardons. So just keep all that in mind, the Bundy case, and there are several other cases as we follow Grandmaster Jay. And I don't support Grandmaster Jay. I don't support the N Not Effing Around coalition. But I do acknowledge that he is being politically harassed, and his arrest and prosecution is racial and political. It has nothing to do with safety or justice because number one, the agents said that they had a blinding light flashed in their face, and they assumed that this man was pointing a gun because they weren't eyeball witness unless, of course, some other Not Effing Around coalition members snitch and say, yeah, it was a gun because they were on the other side of the light. So, and I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, the group has been very incompetent. They haven't managed, that I know of, to stop any harassment since the beginning, since the murder of Floyd by the police, that police atrocity. There have been over 104 vehicular assaults on Black Lives Matter protesters. Everyone from the Proud Boys to the Patriot movements to the Promise Keepers have shown up to assault and attack Black Lives Matter protesters. And as far as I know, the only people to be accosted or shot by, in fact, Not Effing Around coalition, 3 people have been shot by the Not Effing Around coalition. And all 3 of those people in 2 separate incidents, well, actually 3 people have been injured. They say, because when you read the articles, they say people are injured, some were shot, some were injured, I guess trying to escape the shot. But no, there were at least 4 people injured in 2 separate occasions. And each time it was, in fact, members shooting accidentally other in fact members. Accidental discharge. One, a woman collapsed, and when she collapsed from heat and wearing all that silly military gear they like to dress up in, she fell out and the gun hit the ground, the safety wasn't on, the gun discharged. Another instance, someone was attempting to chamber around or something, and they didn't fully understand their weapon, and the weapon discharged accidentally. But I haven't heard. Maybe you can send me articles at Bro Diallo, at Diallo Kenyatta across social media, where they have done more than just display their weapons. And I know we like that look. There was a Black Hebrew Israelite cult, which is one of the most dangerous ideologies emerging. It's this Black Hebrew Israelite. It is a doomsday apocalyptic cult. And they are emerging. It's one of the largest, fastest growing reactionary ideologies amongst African people. They don't like women. They hate women. They see children and women as property. People look at these black men with their full beards and they're dressed in these purple garments with frills on it, and they march down the street talking about we must protect black women. We must protect black children. And we look, and black people so starved for strength, shows of strength, that we celebrate this cult and the cult leaders emerging, and nobody takes time to really evaluate their ideology. And then you also have, because it is a religion, thus means every day the first thing any religion does is start to factionalize and fracture, and all these new denominations come because it's all make-believe, so you can make up whatever. You read a comic book and you have all these versions and alternate universes of Spider-Man and Batman because it's made up. So anything you say goes. If you're charismatic enough, you can just start all over. You can call your religion Islam, like the Nation of Islam, and it really has no connection to actual Islam or the original Islam that gave birth to it. So you have all these Black Hebrew factions, and then you have these liberal, more digestible Black Hebrews who don't scream obscenities at people as they walk down the sidewalk. I know some. I'm talking about you, Brian, that I talk to, and they'll say, well, no, it's just about having a relationship with God, and it's just about, you know, knowing who we are and where we come. And there's even now I'm finding factions of Pan-African or Afrocentric black Hebrews, when the black Hebrew Israelite dogma and faith and cult is inherently anti-African. It's anti-African, and it creates oppositional positions between. It's worse than the ADOS. But anyway, let me try to get through this, because I wanted to talk about like the difference between, because a lot of times people think this not effing around coalition, and there are other demagogues and dictators and cult leaders. Of course, the most well-established, well-known, Irritated Genie, Dr. Umar Tariq Nasheed, Balu Gong, Farrakhan. And I see it emerging, even though Obama is not a cult leader, he does not exhibit the behaviors of a cult leader. He's more of a parasitic opportunist. There is an emerging Obama cult. And a lot of times this is possible for a cult to form around a person, even though the person that the cult is formed around did not organize the cult. So I wanted to talk about certain organizations and characteristics. I see a lot of people making comparisons between INFAC and the UNIA, because the UNIA had an armed faction, the African Legions, and they would march in the streets in uniforms with weapons. They talk about the Black Panthers, but I wanted to, number one, discuss how INFAC and these other emerging cults and demagogic movements are not. I have Bits and Pieces by Sundiata Acoli, which is a pamphlet where he talks about the negative aspects of the Black Panther Party and the positive aspects of the Black Panther Party. Or as I said, 5 things the Panthers did right and 5 things the Panthers did wrong. And if you start to read that, you will observe that in fact is repeating all the mistakes and not replicating any of the assets or good things of the Panthers. I also wanted to talk about the UNIA auxiliaries, how if you have a movement that is strictly armed force, but you don't have the supplemental or supporting elements of an armed movement, then you are forming a cult. You're not forming a defense network. Even the U.S. military has the Army Corps of Engineers. They have medical, educational, housing, distribution, logistics, all that accompany the military. But if you're arming, starting, and then the concept, the warped concept of a militia. A militia is an arm or an extension of the government, of the federal military, is in fact pro-government or anti-government. When they go to do protests, they coordinate with the local police. If you go to the INFAC website, you have to sign up before you can look at their mission, before you can see anything about them. You have to go onto Facebook or Google and create a login, which means everybody who supports or wants to be engaged with INFAC has to give their government their information over to a multinational corporation or to the government. And this is supposed to be an anti-government movement that coordinates with the police and that is basically creating a database of militant armed black people that corporations and the government have access to, but also they assert that they want to separate from the government, that they want to take Texas or some defined territory and have it be black exclusive land. So they're doing that old chestnut. So there are a lot of issues and holes and contradictions. As Chairman Fred Hampton, I also wanted to talk about the king of armed militancy, Carlos Cooks. I wanted to talk about how to do armed militants or militancy right and how to do armed militancy wrong. And I wanted to talk about guerrilla warfare and when you have an armed force that is anti-government or not supported by the status quo, how you form armed factions and how armed factions are to communicate, maneuver, and engage with the people they're fighting on behalf of and engage with the established government and the established fighting force that is repressing them. And basically, they're doing it all wrong. I've run out of time, so I'm going to do another part to this. But I think that I'm not picking on INFAC or Grandmaster Jay. I do think that he is being railroaded, but I mean, he bought tickets to the railroad show. He got in line, got dressed, got prepared, got in line, and served himself up on a platter to his oppressors. And I know if the oppressor come for you, at least make them work for it. Don't give the oppressor ammunition to take you down with. But that's another. But even if he's going to use discriminatory and inconsistent and contradictory evidence to arrest and try to railroad you, and like I said, he's down there with that Cameron guy, the same guy that couldn't get an arrest of the officers who murdered Sister Taylor, is now going to try to. Now he's going to be super prosecutor now. He went from an inadequate or incompetent prosecutor to a hardcore, and they tried to hit Grandmaster Jay with federal charges they're contemplating, and it doesn't look like that's going to hold up. And if it doesn't hold up, Daniel Cameron intends to bring state charges against NFAC. And that's the main thing. If you're calling people out to arms and you're the leader, you got to take responsibility to those lives. When I would call people out to work an organic garden, when we had our organic garden over there at Hale's Garden, when I would call people to come out and work in the soil, the first thing I thought was, I got to make sure when they come here, they're safe, and that I'm going to take responsibility to work with them, to instruct them on how to do this and to save it. I'm not going to put people at risk in a garden, let alone send people up against federal agents. And I'm at least on the back end. You got to have, if you got guns in the front of the march, in the back of the march, you better have a team of Pan-African, black conscious lawyers and first aid. But I digress. Saying all that to say, we got to deal with these cults, and we have to stop and prevent the emergence and proliferation of cults and demagogues and dictators, not just that plague black movements in the diaspora, and they plague the continent to this day. And if we don't, it's going to corrupt our very notion of leadership. And if we don't, we should embrace leadership, but we need a system for elevating competent and accountable leadership, and a system for expelling incompetent leadership. We need a means to evaluate movements. And I'm going to conclude with that. Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio. You can support, become a Patreon supporter. You can also support by, if you don't have means to financially support, you can share, subscribe, send Bro Diallo, link to the Bro Diallo shows to your friends, allies, enemies, haters, and lovers, and debaters, to help get the word out about the Bro Diallo Show and the Pan-African revolutionary analysis. And to that, I'll be back next week. I guess I intended to get through all this information. It's just a few notes, but you know how I do. You know how Bro Diallo do. So we will revisit this topic, and maybe we'll be discussing this topic throughout the week. This week we will also be putting out, subscribe to the YouTube. You'll see the Iceman's Inheritance book review, and after that we will be reviewing Amos Wilson, Black on Black Crime, and following that we will be reviewing Who Stole the Soul. So I'm really enjoying the book reviews. I've finally, instead of trying to go over every single element of the text, I have knocked it down to where I'm going to do the shows are going to be under an hour, even 45 minutes or less. So that I just think it's easier for people to take the info in, as opposed, because some of the Dale Jones book reviews, the book was under about 200 pages, but the book review would span like 2-3 hours. So I'm going to condense it. So I'm not going to go over every point in the book, but I'm going to pull out the salient and prominent points and overview the book. And I'm going to start doing detailed book reviews with the book club through Patreon. So look for that coming soon. Bro Diallo, thank you for your support. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening. And I will see you, brothers and sisters, for next Bro Diallo broadcast next Monday. Oops. Pressed the wrong button. No, this is the right button. Oh, and this is Dance to My Ministry, Lord Jamal, Brand Nubian. Shout out to Brand Nubian. And I'll leave it at that, because if I start talking about my boys, Derek X and Lord Jamal, man, that's a funny dude, man. Get it together, Lord Jamal. Anyway, Dance to My Ministry. Brand Nubian, one for all. Happy 30th anniversary. Go stream, download, get the cassette for the Brand Nubian crew. Peace.